Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Pedal Shift Project. The Pedal Shift Project is a series of conversations, thoughts, and experiments on bicycle travel adventures, from tips and tricks to ideas on how to ride your ride. Let's shrink the world by bike. Donuts and more are available at pedalshifted.net/393, and you can email the show at pedalshift@pedalshift.net or text me at 202-930-1109 and check Pedal Shift out on all the socials as well. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 393rd edition of the Pedal Shift Project. My name's Tim Mooney. Thanks so much for joining. On this edition, it is the Florida Coast Preview. Yes, that is the next ride. I probably did a terrible job hiding the ball on this one. I pretty much told you all it was coming. Here it is. Here is the ride. It is going to be different in part, I think in a lot of huge ways, even though the finish line is the same. So let's start off with what's different. We are starting off in a different city this time. We are starting off in Jacksonville, Florida. We will be riding over the course of 4 days. I say we, it's me. It's just me this time. From Jacksonville to Walt Disney World. Yes, the classic finish line for these winter trips for these many years. But here's the big deal. By starting in a different spot, it means I'm clearly going to be taking a different route. And the route is going to be the East Coast Greenway for the most part. And that, I have to say, is super, super exciting. What else is exciting about this? I get to take a ferry as a part of it. From the jump, 10 miles into this ride, there is a ferry across a particular river, which I'll get into later in terms of highlights on day one, but that's exciting. A ferry. I don't know why I love integrating ferries into these rides. I love me a train. I love me a ferry. So we've got ferries involved. We're going to be involved with mostly coastal riding with the ocean over my left shoulder instead of my right, which I didn't know you could do that, but apparently you can. Yes, we'll be going southbound in Florida. Atlantic coast, ocean will be on my left-hand side. I've done some Google Street View on this, and I have to tell you, man, it's going to be pretty great. This is some really flat land. There's going to be, of course, a lot of Richie McRich McMansions that I'll be passing by, but there's also going to be some open coastline that I'm just super stoked to be seeing there over my left shoulder. I'll also be revisiting the Florida Coast to Coast Trail. Now, I'm not going to be doing the entirety of the Florida Coast to Coast Trail, but the majority of the section all the way to basically Winter Garden, Florida, where I'll be breaking off and then going south down towards Walt Disney World. So essentially the same portion of the trail that I did last year, I'll be doing this year, but in reverse. If you remember last year when I took, Nova Road back, and I had that horrific headwind, it may end up having some kind of a headwind as well on the Florida Coast to Coast Trail coming back, but I think that it breaks things up a little bit. It's not going to be open road. So although I do anticipate having a headwind, I think that it will be a little more sedate, a little bit better, but we'll see. Who knows what the weather is going to be like. As I sit here right now doing the preview, we are ensconced here in the eastern part of the United States with a major, major Arctic blast. If you remember back to the middle end of January, for those of you listening to it now, you will remember how effing cold it was. And there was snow in places like Pensacola and I believe also Jacksonville as well, which is nuts. Thankfully, that's all going to move on, but the really strange weather patterns that we've been having lately could certainly hit us. Right now, for entertainment purposes, only forecasts do suggest it's going to be more normal, which means mornings in the probably mid to upper 50s when I get rolling, and highs, at least in the northern part of Florida, in the mid 60s. And then as I get closer to central Florida, it may get up into the mid 70s or at least the low 70s. But again, this is very early. You're going to get different weather reports on the days of in the tour journal portion. But so far, I think that the weather is looking pretty favorable compared to what it could have been. I can't tell you how much of a bummer it would have been had I started this trip and I was waking up in 30-degree temperatures and having to ride in it. I might have rethought the camping. We'll just put it that way. Oh, yes, we're going to be doing a lot of camping. We'll get to that in a bit. I will be riding all the way, as I mentioned, to my traditional finish line at Walt Disney World. I will be finishing at the resort that I'm actually going to be staying at this time. So there aren't going to be any Lyfts at the end like I did last time. Interestingly, I'll be finishing in the same spot as I did last year. It's just I happen to be staying there. We'll talk more about that on the day of. The gear. As with almost all of my trips, actually all of them, I should say, all of the Florida trips, this is by Brompton. Part of that is because of ease of transport by flying Southwest Airlines. They are excellent with flying to Brompton. I do have a direct flight to Jacksonville from Baltimore that they do not have direct flights out of DCA. So I will be going down via Baltimore, coming back from Orlando to DCA. The Brompton and Southwest Airlines just fits really well. I've also had very good luck on Alaska Airlines. I think other airlines, your mileage may vary. I've just had very good luck with those two. I cannot fly Alaska Airlines very easily to Florida. It would require me to go basically to Seattle or LA or San Diego or Portland. And that's just a little too much to make it worth it. So yeah, Southwest Airlines is my airline of choice for this particular trip for the last bunch of years. And it's been very good to me so far. I'm going to be doing 3 nights of camping as all of this 4 days of riding, 3 nights of camping, and then finishing off with hotels for at the resort for the rest of my stay. Very excited for the camping. I think there's some just stellar opportunities, and the spacing of it ended up being just perfect. And I'm really stoked about all of that. We'll be doing backpack mode with the front pannier, same as last year. And for those of you who have kind of followed the evolution of my adventures with the Brompton, this was the original kind of setup that I learned from Russ Roca and Pathos Pedaled. And I went away from it for a little while and I've returned to it now. I just find that it's really convenient with the backpack that I have. It checks really nicely. I can fit the tent and a whole bunch of things into that without any hassle at all. It's easy to kind of maneuver. I can throw the backpack on over my back and carry the Brompton and the Ortley front pannier. It's really easy to handle. I find that I'm more mobile in the airports as a result. So I really like that setup for a trip like this. I'm going to be keeping things as minimal as possible because the camping gear, of course, takes up some room in that backpack. The tent really ends up filling a solid half to 2/3 of that backpack. But I'm going to try to get things in there as good as possible so that when I readjust and rejigger things for weight distribution, I got a little bit of space to kind of, throw snacks and stuff into that front pannier. I found last year that I was a little too stuffed in the pannier, and I think I want to make sure that I'm not bringing more than I need for this particular trip. I will not be bringing a stove with me. I think I'm going to be doing some cold soaking per Mysterious James, and per my experience, I think that that is the right choice for this particular trip. Also, when you're doing a lot of the riding where I'm going to be riding, man, I'm within a few miles for the most part, except for in a couple of accepted places, of being able to get a cup of coffee from just about any place. I can get snacks from a lot of different gas stations and other things. It's really going to be quite easy to get my calories in me. So I'm just not going to carry a ton of stuff. I do want to make sure I've got the things that I need. I want to make sure I'm really well hydrated. I want to make sure that I'm carrying good sunscreen. I always buy a new sunscreen for this trip, especially because I don't want to use old sunscreen. It's a lot of sun exposure on some lily white skin, I'm telling you, people. So I need to protect myself. I do not want the sun's rays to cause problems for me later on in life. So sunscreen is a thing. Some of the details that I think are worth mentioning here. I'll give you the breakdown of city to city or location to location. We're starting off in Jacksonville, flying into Jacksonville Airport. I will be taking a Lyft or an Uber or a cab of some type just a few miles away to a hotel for the night. I will be spending the first night in a hotel, largely just to get my best night's sleep that I possibly can. I'll be coming in well after sunset. Of course, sun sets just a little bit after 5 o'clock these days on the east coast of the US, and that's a little early to maybe take a Brompton out, even with lights and whatnot. I could conceivably ride to this hotel, but the Jacksonville airport is not the Tampa airport at all. The Tampa airport is excellent for bicycling from. Done it several times. Jacksonville's airport is possible to bike from, but at that late hour and in an unfamiliar place, I just didn't want to risk that. So I will be taking a short ride to my hotel. The hotel is right on a wonderful cycling road that will lead me to the northern banks, if you go all the way out to the coast of the St. John River. St. John or St. John's? I can't remember. It's one of the two. You Canadians will know my confusion. See, look it up, folks. St. John and St. John's, they're two different cities. Anyways, but this is a river in Florida, and I get to take a ferry across that. So the St. John's Ferry is a very major highlight of day one, and we'll get to the other highlights in a little bit here. Where else am I going? So I'm going to be riding from Jacksonville to beautiful St. Augustine. St. Augustine is one of the oldest cities in North America. It is beautiful. It is a sneaky good biking town. I'm really excited to be doing a little bit of cycling through there, but I will be camping at a nearby state campground there, which I'm super excited about because it is a very beautiful place. And I'm hoping to be able to grab a dinner someplace in St. Augustine before I get myself all situated at the campsite. And that's going to be a wonderful day one. A little over 50 miles for that day. Second day is the longest of the cycling days. Ooh, is it the longest? It's either day two or day four. I think it's close. They're all within a few miles of each other. Going from St. Augustine to beautiful Daytona, Florida, Daytona Beach. Nearby there is a campground that I will be at. And the thing that is fun about that, we'll talk about in a moment here in the highlights section. Day three, Daytona to Lake Monroe. Lake Monroe sounds familiar. I was there last year. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the highlights. And then from the fourth day, Lake Monroe, all the way through Winter Garden and then to Walt Disney World. So that will be the classic finishing coup de grace, as it were, of my, and maybe I shouldn't use coup de grace as my description of a fourth day. That's probably not a good idea. Highlights for day one, as I mentioned before, the St. John's Ferry, but also beautiful St. Augustine. I'm so excited to be back there. I haven't been there in a few years and had a really nice time when I visited there a few years ago. It's cool. It's a funky city, very bike friendly, very dog friendly, but I won't have my dog with me. Day two, all coastal riding is the highlight for day two. And that is from St. Augustine all the way down to Daytona. I will have the coast over my left shoulder the entire time. No slouch on day one either. It's almost all coastal riding there too. But day two, I think that's a real highlight and going to be seeing some really cool stuff as we go along there. Day three's highlights, reuniting with the Florida Coast to Coast Trail. Of course, I had such a great time on that the last time. I'll be doing it in reverse. And I'm going to be camping at Lake Monroe. And like I said, you might have found that to be a familiar location. That is the free Volusia County campsite that I stayed at last year. And it's one where you literally call up some nice person in Volusia County and at their parks department and you say, hey, is that hiker biker campsite free on such and such a date? I did this like 6 months ago. They're like, yeah, you're going to have to call back because we won't have the codes for that until, I don't know, January or February, my dude. And so, yeah, so there's bathroom codes and stuff that you get, but it's free, which I think is fantastic and a beautiful part of that Florida Coast to Coast Trail infrastructure as well. So Lake Monroe Campground, and shout out, I forget his name, to the Australian dude who did a video series on the Florida Coast to Coast Trail and led me to this Lake Monroe Campground, which will, for the second year in a row, will be a place I lay my head. Awesome. Highlight day three. Highlight for day four, folks, we're doing it live yet again. Another thrilling ride into the belly of the beast, mouse, whatever, and then celebrating by flying the Millennium Falcon and drinking blue milk and hitting the cantina. Yes, I'm going to Disney World again, and then I will not burden you with all of that. I'm sitting here right now, also as I speak, my beloved Buffalo Bills, and I may be jinxing this because you will probably know by the time this comes out. Actually, you definitely will. Whether or not my beloved Buffalo Bills will advance past where they are in the playoffs right now. They just defeated the Baltimore Ravens. They are about to take on the dreaded Kansas City Chiefs to have the possibility of going to the Super Bowl. If that happens, this weekend that I am going will be the middle weekend in between that game, which they haven't played yet, hopefully they'll win, and the Super Bowl, which I don't know if they're going to, and well, maybe you do. I don't even remember when this is coming out, but every year I tend to do my traveling on this particular weekend, and the offhand chance that my beloved Buffalo Bills will make it to the Super Bowl and I won't be bicycling in the middle of all of it. So I guess we'll see. That's another maybe highlight we will see to celebrate possibly the anticipation of a Buffalo Bills Super Bowl, or to yet again mourn the fact that they aren't. So, could do a lot worse. Potential issues. The Buffalo Bills do not win and therefore do not go. And I've just jinxed them and I feel bad about it. That's potential issue number one. Real potential issues. I need this trip. I really need this trip more than I've ever needed to. You know what's been going on in my life. There's a lot of mental energy. There's a lot of eggs in the basket on this, I do have to say. And anytime I kind of build something up, you just know something's going to go sideways. You just know it. Something is going to go sideways because I need this trip to be so good so badly. So I think that there's a good possibility that something is going to go sideways. We'll see. Not hoping to jinx anything, not hoping that there's any accidents or anything like that. But, stuff goes sideways when you need it to not go sideways. So that's number one. I'm just throwing that out to the universe right now. Maybe by mentioning it that way, it won't happen. Potential issue number two. I have not gotten my Brompton checked this winter. I typically, in a year like this, where I rode it a decent amount, I would tend to get it in for kind of a once over by my local bike shop that specializes in Brompton. I have been in New York for over a month at this point. My Brompton is nowhere near here. It is back in DC. I am not going to be back reunited with my bike in DC until a couple of days before I leave. I don't think that that's enough time to get it into the shop. I may consider try calling them to see if there's any possibility that I can do that. If I get it in on a Monday, kind of get it back to me on a Tuesday. Typically, that is not how they work. I mean, it just isn't. And the last time that I had work done at that particular shop, it was delayed, and I came very close to not being able to get the bike of my choice with me out to where I was riding. So I can't risk that. But apparently I am going to risk riding my Brompton without having it given a once over. The other interesting thing about this is that there are few, if any, Brompton specific shops in Florida. I have not looked to see if Jacksonville is one of those places. I don't believe that there are any on the coast, but I am going to take a look at that just in case. Now, of course, lots of bike shops that don't specialize in Brompton could potentially do something for it. I've always got, if I need a tire, I can get a tire overnighted. There's all sorts of different things that I could do. But last, when I rode the bike, it was fine. It was doing fine. Now, is it fine for doing 200 miles of consistent touring, 200 plus miles? I don't know. Potential. That's why I put this in the potential issues category. I think it's going to be fine, but what could possibly go wrong, right? Last but not least, tour journals. They start next week. And one last thing for you to all know, this gets us, once we get through the tour journals, once we get through the patented takeaways episode, which is inevitable to come, that gets us through the winter, and that gets us actually well into the spring as far as this podcast goes. And if you look at the numbering of the show, this is episode number 393. We are going to be rounding the corner to episode number 400. And I intend to do a live show to commemorate episode number 400. It will be the 400th episode, and that will be announced later in this tour journal series, so be on the lookout for that. But put a soft hold for a mid-April live show. They will either be on a Friday or Saturday there in mid-April. I really look forward to doing it. I have no idea what I'm going to talk about. I have no idea if we're going to have special guests like we did last time, but we will be commemorating the 400th edition of the Pedal Shift Project with a live show. So look for that later this spring, following this really epic bike tour that I'm so excited to bring to you. New routes, new vibes, lots of opportunities to go sideways, basically all the things you're here for in a bike touring podcast. Here we go. Thank you for joining. You can find Pedal Shift at pedalshift.net for more great bicycle touring content. You can hear the Pedal Shift Project through Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. Opening music courtesy of Jason Kent off his self-titled album. The track is called America. Check out his band Sunfield's latest release, Mono Mono, wherever cool music is available.